The restaurant was packed from wall to wall. Soft jazz floated through the air while expensive glasses clinked together under warm golden lights. Men in tailored suits talked about business deals worth millions. Couples celebrated anniversaries over steaks that cost more than some families spent on groceries in a week. Every table was full, every server moved quickly, and every smile looked practiced. Sitting quietly near the back was Michael Carter, a 40-year-old single father, wearing a clean but faded blue shirt and an old jacket that had clearly seen better days. Across from him sat his 9-year-old daughter, Maya, whose eyes sparkled with excitement as she looked around the beautiful restaurant. This was the nicest place she had ever been. Michael had worked extra driving deliveries all week just to afford this one special dinner. It was Maya's birthday, and after everything life had taken from them, he wanted to give her one memory that felt bigger than their struggles. "Dad," she whispered with a smile, "this place is beautiful." Michael smiled back, hiding the worry behind his tired eyes. He knew that after tonight his bank account would be almost empty, but seeing his little girl happy made every sacrifice worth it. Just as their food arrived, the peaceful evening shattered. A loud voice exploded from the other side of the restaurant. "Are you serious?" A wealthy customer shouted, slamming his hand on the table so hard that people jumped. Every conversation stopped. A young waitress stood frozen in front of him, holding a tray with trembling hands. She looked no older than 28, wearing a simple black uniform and a name tag that read Emily. "I asked for sparkling water, not still water," the man yelled. "Do you people even know how to do your jobs?" Emily apologized immediately. "I'm so sorry, sir. I'll replace it right away." But the man wasn't interested in an apology. His face turned red with anger as he stood up, making sure everyone in the restaurant could hear him. "You're completely useless," he snapped. "People like you shouldn't be working here." The restaurant became painfully quiet. Some customers lowered their heads. Others pulled out their phones, pretending not to notice. The manager rushed over, but instead of calming the situation, he looked at Emily with disappointment. "How many times do I have to tell you to be more careful?" He said sharply, "Go apologize properly before you lose us another customer." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she stayed professional. "I'm sorry, sir," she said again, her voice barely above a whisper. The businessman stepped even closer. "Sorry isn't good enough. I want her fired right now." No one moved, no one spoke. The silence felt heavier than the shouting. Michael looked around the room and realized dozens of people were watching, yet nobody was willing to stand up. Then he looked at Maya. She was staring at the frightened waitress with tears forming in her own eyes. In that moment, Michael knew exactly what his daughter was learning, not from him, but from everyone else in the room. She was learning that good people stay silent when someone weaker is being humiliated. Michael slowly placed his fork on the table, stood to his feet, and calmly walked across the restaurant. Every pair of eyes followed him. He stopped between the angry customer and the waitress and spoke in a steady voice. "Sir," he said, "she made a small mistake. That doesn't give anyone the right to treat her like she isn't human." The entire restaurant fell silent. Even the music seemed to disappear. The businessman looked Michael up and down, laughed at his worn clothes, and sneered, "And who are you supposed to be?" Michael didn't raise his voice. He simply looked him in the eye and replied, "Just a father trying to teach his daughter that kindness is worth more than money." At that moment, no one in the restaurant realized they were witnessing a decision that would change Michael Carter's life. For if someone had walked past Michael Carter that night, they probably would have seen nothing more than an ordinary man wearing old clothes and stretching every dollar he had. But appearances never tell the full story. Just 3 years earlier, Michael had been living a completely different life. He worked as a maintenance supervisor for a large manufacturing company, earning enough to provide a comfortable home for his family. His wife, Angela, was a middle school teacher who believed that kindness was something children learned by watching adults, not just by listening to them. Together they dreamed about saving enough money to buy a small house with a backyard where their daughter Maya could play every afternoon. Life wasn't perfect, but it was steady, and that was enough for them. Then everything changed. Angela was diagnosed with an aggressive illness, and despite months of treatments, hospital visits, and endless prayers, she passed away. In one heartbreaking season, Michael lost the love of his life while Maya lost her mother. The grief almost broke him, but every morning when he looked at his little girl, he reminded himself that he didn't have the luxury of giving up. Maya still needed a father who could smile through the pain, help with homework, braid her hair before school even though he wasn't very good at it, and tell bedtime stories that made her laugh after difficult days. Michael promised himself that no matter how hard life became, his daughter would always know she was deeply loved. But life tested that promise again. A year after Angela's passing, the company where Michael had worked for over a decade announced major layoffs. Hundreds of loyal employees lost their jobs, and Michael was one of them. He searched everywhere for steady work, but every interview ended with the same polite rejection. Some companies said he was overqualified. Others said they had already chosen another candidate. Bills continued to arrive even when paychecks stopped. To keep the lights on and food in the kitchen, Michael accepted every job he could find. During the day, he delivered packages. At night, he drove people across the city. On weekends, he repaired fences, painted garages, and fixed broken appliances for neighbors. There were weeks when he slept only a few hours each night, yet he never complained in front of Maya. She often caught him pretending he wasn't tired, pretending everything would be okay. She even noticed that some evenings he claimed he had already eaten, when in truth he skipped dinner so she could have a little more on her plate. Michael thought she didn't notice, but children see more than adults realize. Even with all those struggles, he refused to let bitterness change who he was. His late wife had always told him, "Your character is worth more than your paycheck, because money can disappear overnight, but character stays with you forever." Those words became the foundation of his life. He treated every customer with respect, helped elderly neighbors carry groceries without expecting anything in return, and taught Maya that the strongest people were not the richest or the loudest, but the ones who chose kindness when life gave them every reason to become angry. That was exactly why, inside the restaurant only a few minutes earlier, he couldn't sit quietly while a frightened waitress was being humiliated in front of everyone. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He wasn't looking for attention. He simply wanted his daughter to grow up believing that real courage isn't measured by how much money you have or how powerful your job is. Real courage is standing beside someone who has no one else standing beside them. What Michael didn't know was that the small decision he had made in those few seconds had already caught the attention of someone who would soon change his family's future forever. The restaurant had gone completely silent. The soft music was still playing in the background, but nobody was listening anymore. Every eye in the room was fixed on the young waitress standing beside the wealthy customer's table. Her hands shook as she held a fresh bottle of sparkling water, hoping to fix the simple mistake that had started everything. "I'm very sorry, sir," Emily said again, keeping her voice calm even though her eyes were beginning to fill with tears. "I brought the correct water this time." But the man wasn't interested in the water anymore. This was no longer about a drink. It was about power. Wearing an expensive designer suit and a gold watch that caught the light every time he moved his arm, he looked around the restaurant like he owned the place. "Do you really think another bottle fixes this?" he shouted loudly enough for everyone to hear. "People pay good money to eat here, and this is the kind of service we get. It's embarrassing." Several customers looked away, uncomfortable with what they were watching, but nobody said a word. Some quietly continued eating. Others stared down at their phones, pretending they hadn't heard anything. Emily lowered her head and apologized once more. "I understand you're upset, sir. Please allow me to make this right." The man laughed coldly. "Make it right? You should have learned how to do your job before you walked into this restaurant." His cruel words echoed across the dining room. Emily stood frozen. She had worked double shifts all week because one of her co-workers was recovering from surgery. She had barely slept the night before after taking care of her elderly grandmother at home. Yet despite everything she was carrying, she had shown up with a smile because she needed this job. Rent was due in a few days, and losing this position wasn't an option. Before she could speak again, the restaurant manager hurried over. Michael hoped the manager would calm the customer and protect his employee. Instead, the manager forced a smile toward the businessman and turned sharply toward Emily. "What happened now?" he asked impatiently. Emily quietly explained that she had accidentally brought still water instead of sparkling water and had immediately corrected the mistake. The manager didn't even let her finish. "Emily, we've talked about paying attention to details," he said loudly, making sure nearby customers could hear. "Our guests expect perfection." She nodded softly. "I know, and I apologized right away." The businessman interrupted with a smirk. "An apology isn't enough. I don't want her serving another table tonight. Fire her." The manager hesitated for a second, then looked back at Emily without defending her. "Go wait in the staff room until I decide what to do." Those words hit Emily harder than the customer's insults. She had always believed that if she worked hard, her manager would stand behind her. Instead, she found herself standing alone while everyone watched. A few employees exchanged nervous glances, but none of them dared to speak. They were afraid that if they defended Emily, they might be the next ones sent home without a job. Michael watched the entire scene from his table. Across from him, little Maya slowly put down her fork. "Dad," she whispered, "she didn't do anything that bad." Michael looked into his daughter's eyes and saw confusion, sadness, and disappointment. She couldn't understand why adults were allowing someone to be treated this way over such a small mistake. Michael looked around the room one last time, hoping someone with more authority would finally do the right thing. But nobody moved. The businessman stood there smiling, enjoying every second of the attention, while the manager worried more about keeping an important customer happy than protecting one of his own employees. Michael took a slow breath. He knew that speaking up might ruin the only special night he had planned for his daughter. It might even get them thrown out of the restaurant. But as he looked at Emily trying to hold back tears, and then back at Maya quietly watching everything unfold, he realized there are moments in life when staying silent costs more than speaking up. Without another word, Michael slowly pushed back his chair, stood to his feet, and walked toward the center of the restaurant. In that instant, every conversation stopped, and the room became so quiet that people could hear his footsteps echo across the floor. Michael stopped just a few feet away from the angry customer. The entire restaurant watched him, wondering what he was about to do. He wasn't a big man, and he wasn't dressed like someone with money or influence. His jacket was worn at the elbows, his shoes had clearly been repaired more than once, and the long hours of working 2 jobs showed on his tired face. But there was something about the way he stood, calm, steady, and unafraid, that made the room feel different. He looked first at Emily, whose eyes were red from holding back tears, then at the businessman. His voice was quiet, but every word carried across the silent restaurant. "Sir," Michael said, "everyone makes mistakes." She apologized, she fixed the problem, and she's doing everything she can to make things right. There's no reason to keep humiliating her. The businessman slowly turned toward Michael and looked him up and down before letting out a sarcastic laugh. "And who asked for your opinion?" He replied, "Mind your own business and go back to your table." Michael didn't move. "Respect becomes everyone's business when someone is being treated unfairly," he answered. "You paid for dinner, not the right to tear someone down." A few customers exchanged surprised looks. Some quietly nodded in agreement, but they still stayed silent. The businessman took a step closer until he was standing face to face with Michael. "Do you even know who I am?" he asked proudly. "I spend thousands of dollars in places like this. People like you should be thanking customers like me." Michael remained calm. "I don't need to know your name," he said. "I only know that money doesn't give anyone permission to disrespect another human being." The words landed harder than anyone expected. The man's smile disappeared. Before he could respond, the restaurant manager quickly stepped between them, worried the situation was getting out of control. Instead of calming both sides fairly, he immediately looked at Michael with frustration. "Sir," the manager said firmly, "you're disturbing other guests. I'm going to have to ask you to return to your table or leave the restaurant." Michael looked at him in disbelief. "I'm disturbing people?" he asked. "She's the one being insulted in front of everyone and you're asking me to leave?" The manager folded his arms. "Our priority is keeping our guests satisfied." Michael glanced toward Emily, who looked embarrassed that someone else was paying the price for defending her. Then he noticed Maya standing beside their table, watching everything with worried eyes. He walked over to her, knelt down, and gently smiled. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Maya nodded slowly. "Dad, why is everyone angry at you for helping her?" Michael placed his hand on her shoulder. "Sometimes doing the right thing isn't the easiest choice," he said softly, "but it's still the right choice." Maya gave him a small smile, and in that moment Michael knew he had made the right decision. He stood back up, reached into his wallet, and quietly placed enough cash on the table to cover their meal. There wasn't much money left inside, but he didn't hesitate. As he prepared to leave with his daughter, the businessman called after him one last time. "Next time, worry about buying better clothes instead of giving strangers life lessons." A few people laughed nervously, but Michael didn't turn around. He simply took Maya's hand and walked toward the exit with his head held high. Just before he reached the door, he heard a voice behind him. It was Emily. Fighting back tears, she said, "Sir, thank you. You were the only person who treated me like I mattered tonight." Michael looked back and smiled warmly. "Never let someone else's cruelty make you question your worth," he replied. "Good people don't become smaller because someone else acts bigger." Emily quietly nodded, but there was something different in her expression now. It wasn't just gratitude. It was as if she wanted to remember every word and every detail about the man walking out of the restaurant. Michael believed he was simply leaving after standing up for a stranger. He had no idea that someone inside that dining room had already made a decision that would change his life forever. The days after the restaurant incident became even harder for Michael Carter. The little money he had saved was gone after paying rent, electricity, and Maya's school expenses. Every morning before sunrise, he left home with a worn backpack, hoping that somewhere in the city someone would give him a chance. He filled out job applications at warehouses, office buildings, delivery companies, and maintenance firms, but the answer was always the same. "We'll call you if something opens up." That phone call never came. During the day, he delivered packages, drove passengers across town, and accepted any small repair job he could find just to keep food on the table. Some nights he didn't get home until after midnight, completely exhausted, only to wake up a few hours later and start all over again. Still, whenever Maya greeted him with a smile, he forgot about his own pain and smiled right back. She was the reason he refused to quit. One evening, while they were eating a simple dinner of soup and sandwiches, Maya quietly pushed half of her meal toward her father. "I'm full, Dad," she said. Michael knew she wasn't. She was trying to make sure he had enough to eat. His heart broke, but he accepted a few bites so she wouldn't worry. Before bed, Maya looked up at him and asked, "Dad, do you ever wish you hadn't helped that waitress?" Michael didn't even need a second to think. He gently smiled and shook his head. "Never," he answered. "Doing the right thing is never a mistake, even when it makes life harder." Maya wrapped her arms around him, and for a moment all their worries disappeared. What Michael didn't know was that while he believed the restaurant night was already behind him, someone else hadn't forgotten it for a single day. A decision had already been made, and very soon a single letter would arrive at his door, bringing news that neither he nor Maya could have imagined. 3 days later, Michael was fixing a broken fence at a small house when his phone rang. He almost ignored it because unknown numbers usually meant another telemarketer or another rejection, but something told him to answer. A calm voice said, "Mr. Michael Carter, we're calling from Bennett Hospitality Group. We'd like to invite you to interview for a leadership position at our corporate headquarters tomorrow morning." Michael was speechless. "I think you have the wrong person," he replied. "I've never applied to your company." The woman smiled. "No, Mr. Carter, we have the right person. Your travel expenses have already been arranged, and we'd be honored if you could attend." Before he could ask another question, she politely ended the call. That evening, Michael found an official envelope waiting in his mailbox. Inside was the same invitation, along with a hotel reservation, transportation details, and a note that read, "We believe character is the foundation of true leadership." Michael read the sentence several times, unable to understand why a company would contact someone like him. Maya looked over his shoulder with a bright smile. "Dad, maybe this is the opportunity you've been praying for." Michael smiled, but deep inside he still believed there had to be some mistake. The next morning, wearing his only suit, the same one he had worn to the restaurant, he boarded the train to the company's headquarters, completely unaware that the biggest surprise of his life was only a few hours away. Michael arrived at the company's headquarters expecting a normal job interview. The building was modern, with glass walls, polished marble floors, and employees dressed in sharp business suits. He felt a little out of place in his old suit, but he reminded himself to stay confident. A receptionist welcomed him warmly and asked him to wait in the executive boardroom. A few minutes later, several senior executives entered the room, taking their seats around a long table. Michael assumed they would begin asking questions about his work experience. Instead, everyone suddenly stood up as the boardroom doors slowly opened. A woman walked in wearing a tailored navy business suit, carrying herself with quiet confidence. Michael looked up and his heart nearly stopped. It was Emily, the same waitress he had defended just a few days earlier. She smiled gently as she walked to the head of the table. Every executive greeted her with respect. "Good morning, Ms. Bennett," they said. Michael couldn't believe what he was seeing. Emily looked at him and smiled. "Mr. Carter," she said, "thank you for accepting my invitation." Michael stood there speechless. "You're the CEO?" he asked quietly. Emily nodded. "Yes, I am." Michael replayed the night at the restaurant in his mind. The tears, the insults, the manager, and the angry customer suddenly made no sense. Emily then said the words that changed everything. "That night wasn't an accident. I was working undercover, and you were the only person who chose kindness when no one else did." Emily invited Michael to take a seat, then a large screen behind her lit up. The boardroom became completely quiet as security footage from the restaurant appeared on the screen. Michael watched himself standing up for her while everyone else remained seated. The video showed the wealthy customer insulting Emily, the manager refusing to defend her, and Michael calmly stepping in without raising his voice. When the footage ended, Emily looked around the room before speaking. "Every few months I work undercover in one of our restaurants," she explained. "I don't do it to test customer service. I do it to discover something much more important, how people treat someone they believe has no power." She paused for a moment, then continued. "Menus, decorations, and profits can make a business successful, but character is what keeps it successful." She looked directly at Michael. That night, dozens of people saw what happened. Some looked away, some stayed silent because they were afraid. But you were the only person who stood up for a complete stranger, even though it could have cost you your own dinner and embarrassed you in front of your daughter. Michael quietly shook his head. I wasn't trying to impress anyone, he said. I just couldn't let my little girl believe that staying silent was the right thing to do. Emily smiled warmly. That's exactly why you're here today. Skills can be taught, experience can be gained, but integrity like yours is something no company can train. It's something a person chooses, and that's the kind of leader we've been searching for. Emily opened a folder and slid it across the table toward Michael. He looked down and saw an official employment contract. At the top of the page were the words Director of Employee Experience and Operations. His eyes widened as he read the salary, health benefits, retirement plan and flexible schedule that would allow him to spend more time with Maya. For a moment, he couldn't believe it was real. Ms. Bennett, he said quietly, there are people here with better resumes and far more experience than me. Emily smiled and shook her head. Some of them have stronger resumes, she replied, but none of them showed the kind of leadership you did that night. A true leader protects people when there is nothing to gain. She then turned toward the executive team. Effective immediately, the restaurant manager who failed to support his employee will be removed from his position pending a full review. We will also recognize the staff members who tried to comfort Emily after the incident because kindness deserves to be noticed. Then she looked back at Michael. If you accept this role, your first responsibility will be helping us build a workplace where every employee feels respected, no matter their position. Michael's eyes filled with tears as he thought about Maya and all the difficult nights they had survived together. He slowly signed the contract and whispered, "This isn't just a job, it's the chance to give my daughter the future she's been dreaming of." Emily smiled and reached out to shake his hand. "Welcome to the team, Michael. You earned this by being exactly who you are." 6 months later, life looked completely different for Michael and Maya. The small apartment that had once echoed with worry was now filled with laughter and hope. Maya had her own bedroom, a new school backpack, and for the first time in years she stopped asking her father if they had enough money to pay the bills. But the biggest change wasn't the paycheck, it was the peace that had finally returned to their home. At Bennett Hospitality Group, Michael became known as a leader who listened before he spoke and treated every employee with respect, from the newest dishwasher to the most senior executive. His office door stayed open because he never forgot what it felt like to be ignored. One afternoon, Emily invited Michael back to the same restaurant where their story had begun. This time, every employee greeted him with genuine smiles, not because of his title, but because they respected the man he had always been. As they looked around the dining room, Emily quietly said, "You changed more than one person's life that night." Michael smiled and replied, "Number, I simply treated someone the way I hoped people would treat my daughter." Emily nodded, knowing those words were exactly why she had trusted him with the company. As Michael and Maya walked out of the restaurant hand in hand, he realized something he would never forget. Kindness may not reward you immediately, sometimes it even makes life harder. But sooner or later, the good you put into the world always finds its way back. And if this story touched your heart, remember this: your job, your money, or your title may impress people for a moment, but your character is what they will remember for a lifetime.